All right. Welcome to Shelf Help. Today we're speaking with Eric Girard, who is the VP of Sales and Marketing at Van Holten's Pickle-in-a-Pouch, the infamous pickle brand that partners with iconic names like Warheads and Pringles, just to name a few. Eric's been a sales and marketing leader in the CPG space for quite a while, so excited to learn about all his experience and expertise. But yeah, let's jump in. I mean, I guess just for the first off, Eric, just for the listeners, the ones that aren't that familiar with the Van Holdens, maybe just kind of give us a quick lay of the land in terms of origin story, the why behind the brand. And I think there was a purchase at some point, some of the core products you guys offer, and maybe just a few places people can get their hands on them. And then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you for your time. We are a old school brand that has taken off and acted very entrepreneurial despite, that kind of legacy that we have. Van Holten's has been incorporated since 1898. So we've been doing business that long. Originally, it was a Dutch immigrant that was doing vinegar and things like that, evolved into relishes, sauerkraut. And in 1949, they put a pickle in a pouch. Not sure exactly that. Our owner said maybe they think it had something to do with like shortages in jars or something. But the Van Holten's family was very entrepreneurial with that. Flash forward to the early 90s, Jim Burns, our current president and owner, Steve Burns, his father, purchased the company in duress is probably the best way to say it without getting into a lot of details, and got involved and really identified the pickle in a pouch as something different than relish, as something different than sauerkraut, and leaned into it. And over the years before I was with the company, really focused everything on pickle in a pouch, moving out of sauerkraut, moving out of relish. And, to today, we are the gas station pickle or the C-store pickle. And, it's something that, the relish and all that went away, and we've been able to focus on that. So a lot of times I'm with category managers. I say, we're the pickle company that's not a pickle company. We're a snack company and our snack happens to be pickles.
Man, I know you've been with Van Holten's for quite a while. I think it's 15 plus years or so. I'm curious just from your take, how has the pickle category evolved since you came on board? And what are some like the biggest changes you've seen and things that have basically not changed at all?
Yeah, so it'll be close to 17 years for me that I've held some sort of role with Van Holten's Pickles, starting as a regional sales manager, going out to wholesalers, going out to retailers, trying to earn shelf space. There's a retailer here in southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, Kelly's Markets, and category manager said to me, I don't know, about a year or two ago, he said he used to come in begging for one SKU to be in our like sandwich cold case. And he said, now I have two or three of your SKUs, one or two of your competitors, and then there's even a third brand I'm thinking about coming in. So, we'd like to think that we're in the forefront of it. We definitely had some competitive pressures too that pushed us, but we really opened it up as a snack. And as competitors have come in, we've still seen our sales grow. They've definitely taken, Snap Pickles, for example, taken a slice of the pie, but they've grown the pie. So, leaning into that snack thing, kind of snack first, pickle second, even though that sounds silly, has really been successful for us.
Where do you see this pickle category 10 years from now? Do you think there's going to be any big evolutions, kind of things you're seeing on the horizon, or just kind of steady continued growth and more popularity as you've seen over the past few years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple different dynamics. There's kind of the whole, people are eating differently in general, right? I'm a kid of the 80s and, it was just sugar, right? Give me as much Oreos, 7-Eleven Slurpees, all that. Now you see people leaning into more savory. You see the keto and the Whole30. I mean, pickles are basically 0 calorie, no fat. Pickle juice itself, not just Van Holten's, but anyone's, is helps you rehydrate. So there's that whole kind of function of like, it's a fun way to snack and get refreshed without overfilling. So there's that aspect of it. We don't lean into a lot of health claims and stuff like that. We just want the people that know that, and they'll seek that out. But then, it's not quite as a blank palette as yogurt where you can add a flavor to it. But a pickle is a palette that you can add things to, that you can add buffalo or hot or more sour, or, we've even played around a lot with the sweet flavors. So I think you will continue to see us and other companies start to now really lean into, how can we make that pickle a different a flavor occasion, a fun flavor occasion that's more than just a slice on top of your burger.
Yeah,
And we're still in the middle of the whole TikTok pickle phase too.
true. Good point. Along that track, diving into the weeds a bit, I know IP licensing, kind of co-branding and has been a core part of the growth strategy as of late, at least. We just curious, just kind of taking a step back. At what point did Van Holden start exploring partnerships like this? And I'm kind of curious, like thinking back, what kind of data points or the trends you were seeing as you're following along on Instagram or TikTok? What led the company to the decision to start investing time and resources in this strategy?
Yeah, yeah. And, this is going further back in my timeline with the company,
Yeah.
but yeah, we have core flavors of dill and hot, which make up, 80 plus percent of our sales, and then we have sour and garlic. And it's always been those four core flavors. Other competitors, they have versions of those flavors. We've launched Chipotle, a competitor launched a chili lime, and we never really saw that our new flavors go. It quite actually kind of bombed, and kind of the same with our competitors. And, looking at the space, I mean, I'll be totally honest, is we were approached by Tapatio at a trade show, or technically a licensing agency for Tapatio, to say, hey, this is a great brand, what you guys have. And we think that the Tapatio, and again, I was very aware just from a consumer aspect of how much hot food is getting popular. Watching Takis, watching Hot Cheetos, watching that stuff really get there. So it was a bit of a sell point, honestly. Yeah, I'd say this. I had great relationships with the owner and my coworkers, but it took me a while to sell that internally, because they were like, hey, Chipotle bombed. These other things we've done are bombed. We sell dill and hot pickles. Why would we pay a royalty to do this? But when I started asking around, and Tapatio, they're a great partner. They allowed us to pre-sell it and ask questions of category managers. I said, hey, I'm not going to say I just want to ask. And I got amazingly positive feedback. And what blew me away is I had category managers respond to me, give me meetings that wouldn't respond to my emails before when I mentioned the Tapatio.
Wow.
So that was massively eye-opening for me. So we launched Tapatio. What I've done, and what's nice about being in a small company where you're not siloed, I'm talking to customers, and I'm talking to product development, and I'm looking at the financials. So I know what it costs to pay the royalties and the impact that has on us. But I'm taking that to 7-Eleven, and 7-Eleven actually helped us launch Tapatio in 2019. So we launched with a partner, and that was really, eye-opening for what that could do for us. Uh, from that point, I created an Instagram account and just started following CPG companies like crazy. And the pandemic definitely delayed us, because we were just booming with sales during the pandemic. We went crazy in 2021, so that kind of held our innovation back a little, because we're just making dill and hot pickles. But that Tapatio, I would say, is our gateway drug to licensing, and it was a great start.
Yeah, that's a great partner to start with for sure. As you started to hone in this process and look at additional licensing partners, what are some of like the, I don't know, parameters? It may be like an actual, true checklist, or maybe it's just kind of a rough things that something feels good, some of like a gut feeling. But are there any, certain parameters or qualifications that from your mind a brand must meet in order to qualify or be a good fit?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a gut feel. I mean, we're a small privately held company. I'm responsible for the P&L. We spend little to nothing on data and marketing research. If you took that, you take, $25,000 and said, would you rather spend that on a slotting fee to get into a store, or a licensing fee to have a new brand? I would rather do that. It can be challenging sometimes when, it's a data oriented world. But to circle back to your question, we take our results seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. We sell pickles in a bag. It's a silly product. Everyone laughs at it. Everyone smiles when I tell them what my job is. Whether for whatever reason they smile, they smile. And, so when I'm out there looking for brands, I'm looking for brands that are fun and have that pop culture feel that we have. We'll talk a little bit about our recent package redesign, but we did one back in 2020 also, which I really think was a catalyst to getting us on more. I noticed immediately. Again, I was the Instagram guy back then. Up until the past couple of years, I was the social media person. I shouldn't be now because I'm too old and out of it for that. But I noticed immediately people started holding our product up and taking selfies with it, especially with Tapatio. So I just sought out brands, and honestly, Warheads, Impact Confections. I just said, man, this Instagram feed feels like what I want our brand to feel like. And I know sour is incredibly popular and pickles are sour. Honestly, I think the owner thought I was high when I suggested reaching out to them. And I did. They're literally their factory. I had no idea was 45 minutes away from our factory. And I
Wow,
told their director of marketing on LinkedIn, said I have this crazy idea. And Lindsay said, let's talk about it. And we did.
that's awesome.
And I continue that today. We have always have conversations going. We've had conversations going, a lot of NDAs on this, and some don't pan out, right? Whether it's the flavor is not quite right, because again, it's a pickle, so there's still only so much you can do, or the brand changes their mind or we change our mind. There are amazing, billion-dollar brands out there that are very well known and things like that, but they don't have that fun factor, or it wouldn't look good on a pickle in a pouch like the Pringles head, it's not going to fit.
You mentioned getting the flavor right. That was one question I was thinking about. Is like, once decision has been made to push forward on a IP licensing partnership like Tapatio or Warheads, R&D and like formulation process look like?
It's not easy. I mean, a Tapatio was our first one, so I mean, I don't know, there are like 27 different iterations of that. We've gotten better understanding how to work with flavor in it, so that's helped. But it's a strong vinegar flavor, so there's going to be guardrails on what you can do. From a sample, we usually, with a partner, prefer a signed deal, or at least a rough structure on what royalties and terms are before we go too far. But, we will look for, once we kind of have that in line, is we'll look for the essence of that flavor. That's what our owner says. You can't do an exact match for Tapatio. You can't do an exact match for Pringles, but you want the essence of what that is and how that plays with a pickle. So, I mean, there have been zero that we've made it and said, this works, we're done. Because we have to get it to a point where we say, does this work? And from a costing perspective, we're introducing new ingredients and things we haven't used. It probably costs more to make it. All of our licensed products have a production cost than our number one selling dill pickle.
Got it.
So we don't obviously that can be in a range. It won't be too big. So once we kind of get that, then we have to send it to the partner. And, then you're doing tastings, you're doing virtual tastings, you're telling them how to slice it, with Mega Chamoy, which is a Mexican company. They're all in Mexico. They don't even understand what a pickle in a bag is, right? You have their marketing person, Allie, she's just sharp as a tack. And she saw this trend on social media like I did. But, then she has to explain it to a high level executive at this guy, Guadalajara, of what is this thing we're even eating?
Yeah.
So it can definitely be, it's not just this brand is cool and let's do it. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure there's a lot goes into it. You mentioned like a few minutes ago about when you approached your team with the initial deal that Tapatio won and got pushed back, like, oh, why are we going to pay royalty on this front? Similar kind of story. Company I built previously in the cannabis space, kind of licensing partnerships are pretty common, but I would say the large majority of them don't end up working out. And I think it's largely because it's usually like a typical, pretty straightforward like royalty structure where it's typically, the brand who's licensing the other, brand's IP is basically paying somewhere between like a 10 to 15% royalty. And in that market, at least, it's so price sensitive. Oftentimes the the IP licensor isn't actually contributing, bring much to the table that's actually going to help offset the price difference. I think a lot of them don't work out because that brand who's licensing the IP has to pay that 10 to 15% royalty back to the IP licensor, but they haven't really found an ability to actually increase the price at all compared to what they're selling other products for. And it's ultimately the cost of the product is the same. And so just the numbers often just don't work out. I'm kind of curious in this world where it seems like it's worked and you guys have a lot of success. Like what is what does a typical deal structure look
Yeah,
like?
it's nothing set in stone. I'll say we are, without divulging all the different deals, it's got to be below 10%. We've talked to brands that, hey, I think this can work, but the amount they want, which, I don't begrudge them that, right? This is your brand. We're going to throw this on a pickle bag, and you want that. So typically would need to be kind of south of that 10% range. We will like the product to be profitable, right? If we're going to put it on a shelf space and we're going to go to that distribution and the fees involved with that, it needs to make a decent margin. From a holistic perspective, for P&L responsibility and looking at the brand, I'm okay with that lower margin if it's part of my father-in-law, who's not with us, and it's a different business, but he said, if you're selling widgets, you can always sell a widget for lower margin as part of your product array if it helps you sell other widgets, right? So a Warheads pickle, Tapatio pickle, that helps us sell dill pickles,
Yeah.
right? That helps brokers, manufacturers, reps be more interested in representing us. That helps category managers want to stop by our booth. And HEB in Texas was a great one. They put our products in because I sent them. I mean, it was a horrible looking package. It wasn't what we ended up. I said, this is what we're thinking of. They put in our Big Papa Hot Mama SKUs, our dill and hot. And we've been there for something like 7-8 years now. And they're a great partner, a great customer. They never actually added the licensed item.
But it opened
So
the door. I got the conversation going. Right. I get that for sure.
yeah, yeah. And same with Five Below. Five Below has become a great partner of ours because, again, they really see that pop culture and innovation. They've been feeding us new product ideas that we've been working on taking to market.
Wow.
And it started with Warheads. Because they saw Warheads, they brought in, we now have, depending on the planogram, up to 5 SKUs. And they literally followed up on a press release and got to me from like a LinkedIn or a PR post or something like that. And now have turned into a very significant customer for us.
Yeah. And part of the agreements, is it, let's just say, you don't have to speak to Warhead specifically, but using that one as an example, as part of that licensing agreement, is there language in there that typically asks that brand, like the Warheads one as an example, to make commitments in terms of stuff they're going to do to help drive sales, whether it's, I don't know, social content or helping with demos along those lines?
And it's different with each partner.
Sure.
Warner Brothers and Pickle Rick is a lot more detailed and structured than Impact Confections with Warhead. Most of the agreement is really on how to use the product, make sure that we follow the style guide and terms. I mean, typically we sign 3-year terms and often extend them if the product does well, but you have to put a minimum guarantee. This is the royalties we'll pay. And if for some reason the product bombs, you have an annual minimum guarantee, and you might have to pay that even if your royalties aren't reaching it. We have yet to have that happen with any of our products yet, whatever level of success. So that the agreements are really about that. The partnership is more of just kind of building rapport and understanding, like, hey, how can we work together to take our products to market? Where can we do social collaboration? Where can we do that? And, it's different. I have a meeting coming up with Mars Kellanova to talk about Pringles, to say, I'm like, hey, this is the social collabs are great, but how could we go to, a retailer and say, we've got 2 great brands. How can all 3 of them work together?
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned that the Chamoy partnership, I think I read like, V1 didn't work out as expected. You tried again and saw success. Can you just curious about what that journey was like in terms of it didn't work, but you guys were committed. Hey, we think this could work. we're going to keep trying until it works, and eventually it did.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there is that expectation of explaining to someone who's not a pickle in a pouch consumer like why this works. So that's one step. I mean, but the other is just getting the ingredients right. I mean, Warheads was the best, and yeah, we still I won't say hate, but we get a lot of negative comments to say this isn't insanely sour. It's a the first versions we tested were insanely sour. And we said to ourselves and we said to the team at Impact Confections, we're like, hey, this is great, but we're not going for the one chip challenge. Like, I'm going to buy this once and force myself to eat it in YouTube in front of people. We're going for turns.
Right.
Right. And so if someone goes on YouTube and says, this isn't sour enough for me, that's okay. Right. But it was kind of that fine line of, we quickly decided, okay, we can't go extreme as Warheads can be and dialing it back. And there was a ton of back and forth in that and just kind of tasting of what their expectations were and what our realization of, what we can and can't sell. Would I do a license that's a one-time production run, a one-time push out there? Possibly, if there was some sort of ROI on that. But what I'm more looking for with those 3-year terms is the first year, you're just getting awareness. The second, you know how planogram cycles work. I mean, I just got an email for a planogram cycle for late 2026 that's due next week.
Wow.
So if my innovation's not ready, it's, if I don't have a UPC and an imagery to submit and things like that, then I'm waiting till 2027. So
Right.
I want those 3-year terms, because it's really the third year when you're really securely getting that planogram space.
Yeah. Totally. Just to kind of tie all this licensing stuff together, let's just say for other CPG marketing sales leaders, what are maybe just a few things that you tell them they should keep top of mind, or recommendations you might have for them as they're getting going in this organization has a big focus on this licensing stuff?
Yeah. I mean, number one is you have to know your brand, right? And you have to know your customers and what they're looking for. And, like I said, needs to be fun to match pickle in a pouch. And frankly, the other thing is you have to have a lot going because it's not all going to pan out. I mean, we had one that got to the 1 yard line and we didn't get it across the goal line. It had nothing to do with the people working on the project. It had something to do with it got to the C-suite and it got killed at a big company. So if you only have that, and it's the same as, I'm a salesperson at heart. I love the marketing, I love the brand building. I'm passionate about Van Holten's, but I'm a salesperson at heart. And, you have to be working 20 different deals, and if 20 of them all work out, then you've got a great problem to solve.
Right.
But that's
Totally.
probably not going to happen.
Yep. That's a great tip. We talked about a bit about the Tapatio flavor, the chamoy flavor, Warheads. Those are all pretty different. I'm pretty sure Van Holten's is sold at this point all over the world, like Canada, UK, EU, Australia, et cetera. I'm curious, have you found consumers in each of those markets have pretty distinct flavor preferences and buying patterns? And if so, like how tailored do you get in terms of with your approach to each market? Like, does the Warheads one only work in the US, or does that work in other markets?
I mean, and honestly, we kind of stumbled into this due to TikTok. I really noticed it. I want to say 2022 going into 2023. These orders are popping out of nowhere. I figured out they were Australia. In Perth, Australia, grocery stores were getting it, and again, we weren't even involved. They're essentially, not diversion, but they're getting it from wholesalers and bringing it in.
Right.
And, calling it the TikTok pickle and putting it out. So, we had an incredible assist from that. So, what I've been doing is just kind of leaning into that assist I got. And that's really where Warheads came from. It was like, okay, this fits in. Flavor profiles are totally different. I was at a trade show in Germany in 2023, and I mean, you have to explain the whole product, not just the company and all that. So it's really that Gen Z that does it, that gets it for us, and we are selling in Europe now, and we do find the licensing is very strong for us there. So the best example would actually be not flavor, but our licensing with Warner Brothers and Rick and Morty for our Pickle Rick pickle. That's, I think it's maybe changed now, but originally as we rolled out in Europe, that was our number one seller.
Oh, wow.
So people crave that American pop culture. So, we've leaned into that. And then, this is a whole other uh, topic of conversation. But the other thing we did is we're in this whole food dye transition right now. We took our food dyes out so that we could be in Europe in a more formal way.
Yeah.
So that's been a whole learning process as well.
I was going to ask about that actually, because I know, each country have different regulations around ingredients, how products can be made. And it sounds like you have to tweak customized formulations for multiple markets. I'm curious, how does that work? Are you running, you know, uh, as you're selling in these other markets, using the same lines, and just ones you have to totally clean it out and then do the line for this run for this next country? How does that
We
work?
we have, and Steve Burns, our owner, and we're a small privately held company, right? So we're not like private equity looking to spin off. We're not looking to make quarterly numbers. I mean,
Sure.
we're looking for long term sustained growth and profitability.
Yep.
And part of that P&L responsibility. So we have added capacity to the factory to
Yeah.
be able to do that. We've had to make different lines. We're becoming more nimble and flexible and learning how to switch lines to be able to move among production. And again, that's not my role, but heavily engaged in those conversations. And there is as our production director says it, the Eric Girard International brine wing that we had to add, for this so that we could supply Europe in a way that was efficient to us. And that's all great because I'm not going to state here exactly when we'll do it. We'll take those food dyes out of our formulations here in the US. So it was an amazing blessing that we figured out how to do that for Europe first.
Yeah, totally.
There's a lot of companies that have done nothing to figure out how to produce without food dyes. Thank you to TikTok and pushing us into Europe. We got an amazing head start.
That's great. That's awesome. Shifting gears a bit from a visual identity packaging design standpoint, I'm pretty sure I've heard you say something along the lines of, as you think about packaging design, the package has to win the thumbnail first. 90% of discovery starts at a 9 by 16 screen, which I totally get where you're coming from there. But I'm curious, can you just kind of speak to this approach a bit and how you think about this when you guys are looking at packaging design?
Yeah, I mean, we've really leaned heavily into bright colors. And again, I just go back to fun and go back to pop culture, right? You could put little garlic cloves or dill or things like that on your product to do that. That's not where we go. I mean, we know that our product lends itself to fun and flavor exploration. So you see people putting fruit roll-ups around it, people coring up the pickle and putting Takis and gushers. So that that visual piece, that wanting to see that, going with bright blue for our dill and bright red really helps us just pop out, win attention right away on that screen. And it helps us. We also leaned heavily into Pickle-in-a-Pouch, and we've put that at the top of our packaging now, and really focused on that as our. There's some trademarking issues with descriptive. We can't really trademark that, but we want to be the pickle in a pouch, pickle in a bag. We want to be fun.
Pretty sure you guys rolled out a packaging redesign last year, I think it was. Where I just want to start with is just why, like, meaning what led to that decision to go through that packaging redesign process in the first place?
Well, I think, we go back to, we really hadn't done much throughout the history of Van Holten's every, maybe 10 years or something, some tweaks. And, we did a more significant tweak in 2021. And, I firmly believe that was led to our success because, again, all of a sudden the selfies of people holding a Tapatio pickle leaped with us. So, and you look at Budweiser, you look at these big brands, they refresh their packaging regularly to call out on the shelf. So, we leaned into that from the pop culture thing that was happening to us, and just from the shelf space and really identifying us with Pickle in a Pouch. And it makes a difference. We're getting great comments from buyers, great comments from category managers. Just the local grocery store I shop, we were always kind of down in the corner at Hy-Vee. And all of a sudden they noticed with our new packaging, the manager put us in a much better situation. Right. And, it's the same product. It's still pickles, but I really think that packaging helped.
You talked about C stores have, called this like the gas station pickle. I know that's a big channel for you guys. Compared to, you said like, Five Below is a big customer for you guys as well, and HEB. I'm curious, like what's have you found is really unique about this C store channel, and what have you found over the years is really key to winning, and maybe especially what's key to winning that maybe is different than your traditional retail, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, key to winning is all about velocity. Yeah, I mean, a category manager can like or dislike certain things, but shelf space is column inches and how much can you sell in that shelf space. So we have to show the velocity, and that's why showing we're updating packaging, showing that piece. And we have to show incrementality too. It can be a challenge because we're going up against huge brands that, are coming in with shelf space studies and things like that. We have to show we're getting them incremental business. And, the best example is, I won't name the retailer just to not share that, but I was talking to a retailer the other day. She put us in next to our competitor. I've been begging for that space, because we lost it to them. And I said, you can sell both. And she said, I haven't seen cannibalization of our current item. You're bringing something different. And the challenge to kind of, loop back to all this pop culture stuff I have. I mean, we're still selling pickles to Bubba, constantly be coming up with ways to solve convenience stores, category managers and or store managers problems and make it easy for them.
That's really helpful. Thinking about marketing resources, getting the most out of your budget. When you think about resourcing, how do you think about it in terms of like what variables or frameworks do you think about in the context of you build out your plan with regards to internal versus external resources? Like, are there certain functions you feel like, whether it's, I don't know, influencer management or creative agencies, packaging design, et cetera, that you always feel like, yeah, we need to have this in house versus contract out, or is it pretty situational?
I mean, somewhat situational. I mean, we just brought on a marketing director. We've had kind of different fresh out of college marketing coordinators, marketing roles over the time that I've been with the company. Great people that have come in and out of the company, but bringing in someone that has done packaging relaunches before, that's been critical. But, we don't really spend a lot of money in marketing budgets. To me, most of what we spend is on that B2B time frame. B2B, and getting in front of category managers and getting that, and some of the advertising, it's, what comes first, the cart or the horse. But, from my standpoint and being in the trenches, is it's all about gaining and maintaining that retail distribution to build your brand. And, from that B2B, trade shows are massively important. Being at Sweets and Snacks, being at NACS, being at IDDBA, that is critical for our business.
Totally. On that track, I know you guys have had a lot of success at trade shows over the years. What have you found is key to, let's just say, maximizing ROI at a trade show in terms of what generates the most success, gets most attention?
I tell you what, if Sweets and Snacks is a great trade show, people from all over the world attend that. It's moved from Chicago to a mix of Indy and Vegas. It's my favorite show of the year. I usually lose my voice every year because I talk so much. But to the kind of looping back to the licensing and the new item and that stuff, having something in the new item case every year draws traffic to our booth. And again, they may not buy that product, but it shows that, hey, this is an innovative company that I need to look at, that I need to come over, and then we need to scan their badge with the app. And it's what's really critical, and I won't divulge my age, but I've been doing this for a while, and I come from more of the handshaker to get out in the car and go see people. I've flown across the country to hear the word no. So now you just get unreturned emails, and that's your no. So that is often your only chance to build some conversation and rapport. If that category manager, if she comes by your booth and has a positive interaction with myself or Ian or Steve, you're more likely going to get that email returned. Right. And, here's a reason I need to talk to these people. So it's your shot at FaceTime.
Sure. Other than having a new product in the shelf, which totally makes sense, like, any other tactics, strategy that, thinking back, that you found has really worked? Whether it's, I don't know, having a big, loud, colorful mascot in the front of the booth, drawing people in, or anything that you found has had the most impact?
It's the old is school. It's the first question, or one of the first questions I ask in any job interview is, what's the most important part of sales? Is follow up, right? I mean, every person that comes by our booth is going to get an email or a text or a phone call or something like that. So it's the preparing, doing whatever marketing we can ahead of time to say on LinkedIn, we're going to be there, to whatever platform Nats may offer, to, on their site, now it's all apps. I'm going to pre-plan my show. So, that $500 package that makes sure you have a picture of your item on the app on your booth, that's worth it. Do that. Don't be stingy. I still see small brands and I get it. And I'm friends with a lot of people that will come to me and say, hey, I know you're a small company. Let's talk. I still see them with notepads writing Adam's name down. I'm like, no, buy the lead app so you can scan their badge and then you can get that. So we don't get too gimmick. We don't do a pickle outfit. We really just try to make our booth welcoming, use the bright colors to catch our attention, get the best spot possible, and, work our asses off the day of the show.
Yep, totally. Last question for you, Eric. You've been in the CPG space for quite a while at this point. Sounds like you're tracking trends and whatnot and TikTok and Instagram. Any specific brands just in the broader CPG space or just general trends that you're particularly excited about or been tracking at all?
Well, I mean, it kind of what started our conversations is the partnerships. I mean, I think the younger consumers expecting it. I think it's challenging production people. It's challenging, because I mean, the easiest thing would be to make one flavor of pickle and never change the pack size or never change anything. I mean, our efficiencies at the factory would go through the roof,
Right.
but volume would go way down. So I think that you're going to continue to see a challenge with the right amount of innovation for your brand. Is it going to be easier for a Mars or a Mondelez or someone to pull that off? Heck yeah. But for smaller or scaling brands, it's finding that innovation, that fit, that is true to your story of who you are, and getting that. And then I think, I mean, I have, young teenagers and young 20 something, and it's snacking. I mean, the snacking is over meals, is so incredible. And just that variety in snacking. So I think, we're playing around with a new concept I can't talk about yet, but a line extension that would be a different product, but it's snacking. It's snacking, it's protein, it's people using food for functionality. So yeah.
All right. I'll keep my eye out for that one. I'm very curious what that would be. Awesome, Eric. Well, this has been great. We appreciate the time. I think a lot of really good insights here, especially on the licensing front. And yeah, really, really helpful. What's the best place for people to follow along with you specifically? And then what's the best place for people to follow along with the brand as well?
All our socials are at Pickle-in-a-Pouch. So be that Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Yeah, I mean, to find our products, big shout out to Five Below. Anything you see something new, we're looking to launch another licensed item in early 2026, and they should have it first. I mean, they had
Perfect.
Pringles first, they have blue raspberry first, so that's the way to see our innovation. But this brand was built on the corner store, the independents, and we still work on that too.
Perfect. Awesome. That's great. Awesome, Eric. Appreciate the time. I think that's the pod.
Okay, really appreciate it, Adam. Thank you.